True.
Do you think I should mention?
True. Maybe. Okay, so
I'm not going to mention that one was me.
Yeah, just
But the other ones I will, because they're not.
Okay, that's fine.
I like it when
The March 10, 2025 Select Investigative Committee meeting will be called to order. This morning, our purpose is to deliberate on the evidence that we heard on Friday. I apologize for the delay in getting started. One reason we had the last meeting on Friday is there's less going on in the building, and it's easier for all the representatives involved to be here. And this morning we had more going on, and consequently we had some delays. I also wanted to say that Representative Holheisel has reached out to me, and he is chair of a committee this morning that's taking final action, and for that reason he apologizes for not being present. The ultimate issues before us, I believe, are one and perhaps two. One is whether to dismiss the complaint. If we do so, the inquiry is over. If, however, we decide not to dismiss the complaint, we must then decide if it rises, the allegations rise to the level that we should impose a sanction, and if so, what sanction to impose. Before getting to these one or two ultimate issues, I believe we need to address several preliminary or predicate issues. And I'm going to set forth those issues, and then we will handle them in due course with discussion. I believe the first issue we need to address is what rule of the House does the complaint allege was violated? Secondly, what material facts does the credible evidence establish? Third, do these material facts ground a finding that Representative Holheisel, quote, participated in conduct that disturbs the orderly proceedings of the body? And finally, four, do these facts ground imposing a sanction against Representative Holheisel? Or put differently, if there was a rules violation, does that rule violation, under all the circumstances, ground imposing a sanction against Representative Holheisel? Before we get into a discussion of these issues, however, I think it also helpful to have some background in how 4 different proceedings in the last, I believe, 10 years in the House have been handled in terms of what the essential facts were in those cases and what the appointed select committees ultimately decided. And for that information, I'm going to turn the floor over to Representative Humphreys.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do think it's important to kind of understand what select investigative committees have done in the past, and just wanted to give everybody a bit of a history. I'm going to go back more than 10 years, if that's okay. I think this is maybe everything that research found where there had been an investigative committee. In 1951, there was an allegation of bribery that was investigated with no action being recommended by the committee. In 2010, there was an allegation of misconduct against Representative O'Neill, and there was a committee, and they dismissed the complaint on that one. In 2012, there was an allegation of deliberately misleading House members on an amendment. It was investigated by a select investigative committee, and the complaint was dismissed. That was Representative Ward. In 2015, there was an allegation of inflammatory language being used and inferences And it was racial in nature towards a committee of anyone who might support a specific bill. And the investigative committee in that case dismissed the complaint. Then there was an allegation in 2021 against Representative Coleman, and the way that ended was that it was a claim against misconduct involving public threats and physical abuse. And there was actually 2 complaints against Representative Coleman. What happened in that case was a strongly worded letter was sent to Representative Coleman, but the investigative committee did not make any sanctions or determinations in that. And then here we are in 2025. But that would be the history, as far as I know it, of all the investigative committees that we've had so far in the Kansas House.
Thank you, Representative Humphreys. Does the committee have any questions for Representative Humphreys about what she's just told us? Representative Francis.
So between 1951 and 2010, there were no complaints filed to the best of our records?
That would be to the best of, and this would have been that KLRD did some research back in 2021 before the last investigative committee, and that's what they found, right?
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Representative Osman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would Representative Humphreys or KLRD share this information with the full findings with the entire panel?
I'm happy to share the report that we got in January 21st of 2021 from, at that time, it was J.G. Scott was the director of KLRD. And this is what he sent. And then there's been a little bit update of what happened in that 2021 and then the one today. So I'm happy to share this that we got back in 2021. I was on that investigative committee, by the way.
Right, so I'm not sure how that's going to get shared. Perhaps could I ask could we have copies made of that? And then we'll take a recess after those copies come, and you can then study them. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that it was a thorough presentation as far as the history goes. I just want to make sure that, number one, we do have access to it, and number two, it becomes public record as well.
Right, I think that those are good points.
So I'm a little hesitant because I wrote notes on my piece of paper, and I didn't share every single thing because I didn't think it was prudent as far as names of everybody that had a complaint, but I did write it on here, so I'm a little hesitant to share this, but I could, I'm sure, find the original of this and in my email. I mean, I keep everything in email, and I have lots of folders. I'm sure I could find it, but I'm a little hesitant with my notes written on here. I feel like it's personal.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm happy to, when we have access to a clean copy, I'm happy to, as long as we all have access to that clean copy and we have, it becomes part of the record.
So I think the best course of action is to recess, to get copies, and then proceed. Just makes sense. Unfortunately, you know, we will be delayed a little bit, but I think that's the best way to proceed. Okay? We're in recess so that copies of the document clean copy of the document can be made and distributed to the committee. I call the meeting of the Select Investigative Committee back to order. During our recess, we had copies of the documents that Representative Humphreys had consulted in preparing her remarks about past cases. And in the meantime, we've passed those documents out to the committee, and the committee members have had an opportunity to review those. So as I indicated earlier, I thought we needed to address, I guess, three issues before we reach the ultimate question of what to do with respect to a dismissal or sanctions. And the first of those is, what rule of the House does the complaint allege was violated? Let me speak first to this, and then we'll open it up to discussion. The complaint alleges that Representative Hoheisel engaged in misconduct by violating Mason's Manual Section 122, which is headed Breaches of Order of the House. In the evidentiary hearing, Representative Carr pointed to Part 2 of the Section 122, alleging that Representative Hoheisel, quoting now from the manual, participated in conduct that disrupted or disturbed the orderly proceedings of the body. So in my view, that is at least the first question that we have to address, whether or not Representative Hoheisel participated in conduct that disrupted or disturbed the orderly proceedings of the body. And open it up to discussion from the rest of the committee.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Amex.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And going back, and I appreciate the copies that you've given us of the complaints that have been filed since time began, I guess. And looking at these, and the one thing that I never did see in any of these, that there was an admission of guilt in any of these items. Is that correct? If I could ask that real quick.
Representative Humphreys.
I can't say definitively what happened in the hearings. This was just the report of what happened, so sorry, can't answer.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, then with that question being answered, you know, in the brief time that I had to look at, I think that pretty much clear that there never was such admission. So anyway, I wanted to bring that out. Looking at this and looking at what happened on the day, and from Mr. Hoheisel's testimony that he provided, when it comes to disruption.
Representative, we're going to focus on that issue later. Okay. What I'm really asking now is whether anybody has any discussion about what the alleged violation of the rule was, and we'll get to what happened later. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Representative Francis.
Well, and I think, you know, while everything is always kind of debatable, you know, Chapter 12 deals with decorum and debate. This began at least as a side conversation on the floor, not as they were engaged in debate. I think it did escalate, you know, as the exchange escalated, that there was a disruption in the House. But I also think, as often when we deal with things in the legislature, there was a point of order was made, or decorum. I'm not 100% sure which. And it was handled. You know, order was reestablished. Leadership took the opportunity to take a recess so people could calm down. But
Representative, once again,
yeah.
I'm sorry, maybe we're not clear. Right now, we're talking about what rule is alleged to have been violated. Next, we're going to move into what we believe happened.
And I'm sorry, that's what I was trying to say, is that's why I don't believe 122 would be the appropriate reason. Sorry.
Okay, well, we'll get into that. Yeah. Representative Ballard, yes.
I think if the way you described it, there was a disruption on the House floor.
Right. So
And-
excuse me, I'm sorry. Does everybody then on the committee agree that the rule alleged to have been violated is that Representative Hoheisel participated, reading the rule, participated in conduct that disrupted and disturbed the orderly proceeding of the body? That is the issue we're now talking about. Whether he did that or not will be the next question. Representative Osmond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as we look at Representative Carr's original complaint, it says that it's detailed in Mason's Manual, Chapter 12, Section 122, among others. Under Representative Hoheisel, he specifically says 122.2, but Representative Carr mentions among others. In his oral testimony, he stated 121, and among others does leave this open for allowance of other chapters or other subsections within that chapter. So I suppose that is the question presented to us. Are we solely focusing on Chapter 12, Section 122, or are we opening this up to, say, 121 or other chapters?
Yes, that's right. And we did ask Representative Carr what the others was, and as you point out, Representative Osmond, he pointed to 121. I have read 121, and I've also studied 122, and the only portion of either of those sections that I find relevant to our investigation is Section 122.2, which was specifically mentioned in the complaint, and it has to do with disruption. The entire 122.2 reads, and I don't think some of it's relevant, but I'll read it into the record. It says, "No person shall indulge in personalities, impugn motives of members, use indecent or profane language, and this is the portion I think is relevant to our inquiry, or participate in conduct that disrupts or disturbs the orderly proceeding of the body." As I read the complaint and after asking questions of the complainant, that's the only portion I see of these rules that has any relevance, but I'm open to discussion of some other portion. Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I think you said or participation in conduct. I mean, I do think indecent or profane language was used, but I still do have a question on, is this decorum and debate, Chapter 12? So yeah, if we just read that paragraph without looking in the context, I would say it was disruptive, there was profane language, it did disturb the orderly proceedings of the body. I don't have, that did happen, but does this rule apply? I can't say 100% because it's under decorum and debate. So I'm a little, I'm not, I don't have a strong definitive decision on if 122.2 was applicable.
Or as I understand it, or any other portion of Section 121 or 22. You don't see any other section as arguably applicable.
Well, no, Section 12 is decorum and debate. So is it debate at the well, or is it what happens on the floor? I would love I would love clear language to guide us on this, but I don't see it. But if we only look at, not the context, but 122.2, that did happen, but got to look at the context.
Okay. Any further discussion then of the rules that we're going to be considering as possibly breached as we go forward with the next question? What material facts does the credible evidence establish happened? So once again, the question now on the table is what you believe the credible evidence established happened. I'm open that issue up for discussion.
I need a clarification. What do you mean exactly? I mean, we know the facts as written and even from the testimony from people who witnessed it.
Right.
Are we referring to that, what they saw, what they heard?
Right. So we have reviewed written testimony by several representatives, not parties, as well as the party representatives, and we also heard oral testimony from the parties and their responses to our questions. So that's the body of evidence, I think, that we're looking at. And the question is, and there was some dispute, quite frankly, about what happened, what people said and what they meant. And I think it's our duty to sort through some of those important disputes on what happened and draw our own conclusions as to what the credible evidence established. I'll then go ahead and give you my views, and then we can open it up to further inquiry. I believe that the credible evidence shows that on the day in question, Representative Carr alleged in the well that members of the Republican caucus were racist because a carrier of an earlier debated bill had refused to answer his question about the bill. Representative Holheisel did not believe such an allegation was proper under our rules, and indeed Section 114 of Mason's Manual specifically allows a carrier to refuse to answer questions. And Section 124.3 forbids a member from impugning the motives of another member during debate. An allegation of racism is indubitably an allegation of improper motive. Not long after Representative Carr's allegation of racism, Representative Holheisel walked to the Democratic side of the aisle to speak with Representative Chu about a committee matter. Mr. Holheisel then continued after the short discussion, walking up the aisle as he walked away from Representative Chu. As he was passing by Representative Carr's desk on the floor, he said to him in words or substance that Representative Carr's allegation of racism was neither truthful nor proper. He did this, however, in an inartful, if not inappropriate manner, calling Representative Carr's allegation of racism bullshit. Representative Carr replied by challenging Representative Holheisel to a fight, saying, "If you have a problem with it, meet me outside in 10 minutes. Representative Holheisel refused the invitation to fight. The exchange lasted less than 15 seconds. Representative Carr does not dispute asking Mr. Holheisel if he wanted to take it outside. In the hearing, however, he claimed that this was an invitation not to fight, but to discuss the matter. My next statement of finding of fact, I'm pained in doing this, but I think it's important for the proceedings, and I therefore do not find Representative Carr's innocent explanation of his reply credible for two reasons. The common understanding of such words, "let's take it outside," is a challenge to a fight. In this regard, there is also a material inconsistency between Representative Carr's statement to the Highway Patrol on the day after the incident and his complaint lodged several days later. In his statement to the Highway Patrol, Representative Carr stated that after Holheisel told him his allegation of racism were bullshit, Representative Carr, quoting from the Highway Patrol report, asked Representative Holheisel if he wanted to take it outside. And continuing, and Holheisel said, "We do not. No, we do not," quoting from the Highway Patrol report. However, and I believe this is important, in his complaint filed several days later, Representative Carr skips over his challenge of Holheisel to a fight. Rather, he alleges that after Holheisel's statement to him that he, Representative Carr, was unclear, that he, that is, Representative Carr, was, quote, unclear what he was talking about and more unclear about why he had stopped at me. This inconsistency causes me to question Representative Carr's claim that his reply, "If you have a problem with it, let's take it outside in 10 minutes," was a benign request to discuss the matter further. So that is my assessment of the credible evidence on what I believe the important facts and the sequence of events is. And we're now open for discussion from the committee. Yes, Representative Francis.
Yeah, I would just say I think that the complaint deals with the word bullshit and that confrontation. You know, as we look at 122.2, I don't think that by and of itself caused an escalation that disrupted the body. I think it was the conversation afterwards, and a member of the Democratic Party was concerned about where it was going, and that's what caused the disruption, whether or not 122 or not applies. So that's my thought.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate the comments by you and my colleague to my left. I do have to say one thing. If we're looking at the events that happened and whether or not we're to make a determination that a disruption did happen on the floor of the Kansas House of Representatives, I got to say absolutely it did. And that I believe Mr. Hoheisel, when he came across the way, he obviously had a discussion with Mr. Hsu about a meeting that was going to happen later in the day, and that's fine. But when he left, he says in his comment, in his testimony, that he made eye contact with Representative Carr, correct? I believe that's the case, and that's when he made the statement about, you know, what he said was bullshit. And that being said, that is a confrontation. That is where the disruption began. And at that point, you know, it broke loose. And excuse me, but I truly believe that happened, that's what caused the disruption at that point. And if we're to make a determination that disruption happened, and if there is fault, guilt, whatever we want to call it here, it did happen. You know, we were all there. So anyway, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Francis.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying, Representative, but I also think we need to take into consideration that the point of order was recognized. The chair at the time dealt with the situation. You know, what happens in the House, we generally don't take it to special select committees after it's been done.
Representative Ballard.
All right. I said from the beginning that there was a disruption. Now, what level of disruption you're trying to say is, but there was a disruption. The other portion was going directly to a person's desk, and I asked for clarification in terms of stopping there, pointing your finger, standing over a person, sitting down. That is intimidation. So we have to look at that. I wanted that clarification on take it outside because for as long as I can remember, I see as take it outside is not to go talk. When we're going to take it outside, we're taking it outside and we're going to mix it up, get it on, whatever you want to say, that's what's going to happen. So I asked for that clarification because there's different ways people can take that. I think I would have to say, in essence, I think take it outside was we're going to mix it up, if we look at it. But if we want to establish, was there a disruption? The answer has got to be yes, because there was a disruption. Even though it may have been settled and it was calmed down, there was a disruption.
Thank you for that. And I appreciate the comments of everybody. The way I see it is, yes, I don't think there's any doubt that there was a disruption on the floor. I see it being caused, three causes. The first cause, and I think under the law you would find this both a but-for and approximate cause, was the comment by Representative Carr on the floor calling the Republican caucus, at least some of us, racist. As I've said, that was against the rule. It impugned the motives of members during debate, and such words always threaten to impede debate on the substantive issues before the body. That's why it's forbidden to prevent this kind of disruption where people are more concerned about attacks on their person than they are about the substance of the debate. I also find that the second cause was Representative Holheisel's, which he conceded during our evidentiary hearing, that his manner of approaching Representative Carr and the words used were not appropriate for the situation. Better would have been to speak with Representative Carr in a more private place off the floor and not to have expressed his displeasure with crude language such as bullshit. So that, to me, is a second cause for the disruption. And then finally, I also find that a third cause was present, and I find that Representative Carr's challenge to a fight outside material escalated the encounter, leading to the point of order by Representative Haskins, which, of course, was the ultimate disruption. I'm not blaming Representative Haskin for doing that. I'm just saying that it was those three causes in succession that resulted in the actual disruption of the proceedings. Representative Osman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So there's been discussion about Representative Carr and his words up at the well. And we could go through on whether that impugns the motives of another member or other members. I could easily make the argument that no, it doesn't, and in fact, it does the opposite. But I think that that question is irrelevant. The discussion before us today is a complaint from Representative Carr to Representative Hoheisel. And I think that our evidence should focus on that rather than the actions of Representative Carr, which are not part of this complaint. If we were to ask the question, though, what we bring up as well, that there was a discussion just previously that because during a point of order after the altercation happened between Representative Carr and Representative Hoheisel, that and the matter was settled at the well, it was gavelled down, that should have been the end of it. If you were to take that argument, then the words of Representative Carr at the well were also gavelled down, and that should have been the end of it, and yet it wasn't. Representative Hoheisel did come and have further discussion with Representative Carr. So the question of should the gavelling have ended the altercation? It didn't in this case, and that is what we are discussing right now. So if we focus specifically on the altercation itself, that is an ongoing process in the question of whether that was disruptive to the debate as a whole. And I think we can make the argument that it was.
Let me respond. It was gavelled down, and you said that should have ended the matter. I don't think that's necessarily the case. In other words, I don't think there's anything wrong with a representative approaching another representative about something he said in the well, regardless of whether it was gavelled or not. I do agree with you, and I've said that I think the manner in which Representative Hoheisel chose to raise the issue with Representative Carr was inappropriate and led, at least in part, to the disruption. You talk, your Representative Osman, you also raised questions about whether or not it's relevant what Representative Carr did in the context of this situation, because the allegation, the complaint is made against Representative Hohlheisel. I find I disagree with you for this reason. You as a lawyer know this, and Representative Humphreys, but I look at it similar to a complaint of negligence, a tort, and where there's a complaint made against somebody alleging a tort, courts typically look at determining whether the plaintiff contributed to the negligence, contributed to the result that caused the harm to the victim. So, and I do think it appropriate for us to look at the entire situation and think of it in terms of, did Representative Carr, the complainant in this case, contribute to the disruption that he's alleging Representative Hohlheisel caused? Representative Francis.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, I would agree. I think as we investigate this complaint, that the escalation that caused the disruption, you know, there's that saying, it takes two to tango, created that. And then also, just as a point of order, and I know we don't have that testimony in front of us, but I don't believe Representative Carr was gavelled down on the when he accused members of the Republican Party for being racist. I don't believe there was a gavel. He was asking a question, and it proceeded on.
Is there any other discussion of what we believe happened in terms of how this ended up in an admitted disruption on the floor? Okay, so I guess the next question is, in some ways, I guess our ultimate question is, do these facts ground dismissing the case or imposing some sort of sanction against Representative Hohlheisel? And in this context, I think the way we will proceed is with discussion and then a motion if anyone wishes to make a motion at this time. Okay. Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in thinking about this and also the history, so was there a disruption on the floor of the House? 100%, absolutely, no question. Have there been disruptions before? Yes. I have seen women yelling across the aisle at each other, you know, different times. I mean, we've had disruptions before. And so the question here is, in this case, supposedly what happened rose to the level of one representative making a complaint against another, and then therefore calling the investigative committee had to be called. I mean, so to me, some of the question is, was that disruption so egregious that a complaint needed to be made? And when I look at other things that have happened, I'm not sure about that at all. And especially, does it rise to the level of us imposing a sanction? I think the back and forth between the two representatives is what caused the biggest part of the disruption. And, you know, and just looking at the history of other things that have been dismissed, I probably fall out on the side of this was not good behavior. We can't be happy about it. We should not let that breach of decorum happen. We should be careful not to do that. But I don't know that this complaint rises to the level that we need to take action.
Representative Francis.
And I agree with you, Representative. And I also think that, Representative Hoheisel has no history of having complaints filed against him. He works well across the aisle. There's just not a history there. And he also apologized to the body. So I would agree with the prior representative.
Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under the rules that we follow, when there's an event that happens, and my opinion, when something is not settled by the action of the chair, and that we feel that the matter continues after that, to the point where, as in this particular case, and I asked a question the other day of Representative Carr if he felt threatened, and his answer was yes. We can't have that kind of behavior on the floor of the House, that somebody feels threatened. That doesn't work. So if the action of the chair does not settle the matter, and then somebody feels that they've, had this threat made against them, then the rules are pretty clear. We're going to establish this committee, we're going to hear all the testimony, and we're going to make a ruling. Well, going back to the chair didn't settle it. Our job is to come up with an idea of, or recommendation to the body as to what needs to happen. I believe that an action is warranted. This obviously to me is not grounds for expulsion, but I do believe that there is some type of censure that should happen in this particular case, because we don't go and seek out another member of the House. And even though the Representative Hoheisel did apologize and say that, he would have probably done it a different way. The problem with it is it happened. It happened. And I think to dismiss this would just flat be wrong. And so I would probably favor some type of censure and making sure that the body understands that we believe the rules are important and they need to be followed. That's why they're there. So anyway, that's me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Representative Ballard.
I think I would have to agree with that we have to do something. But I don't think just dismissing it is almost as if it didn't happen. It did happen. We can have very heated debates, and people feel very passionate or whatever words you want to use about what really happens, but it doesn't say that we can act on those feelings. In many ways, when you look at it, Hoheisel invaded someone else's space and was in their face. And then on the other hand, he was challenged. So I think that's where the escalation really occurred. Mm-hmm. One, you're in my space. And number two, I retaliate, along those lines. So I don't think we're deciding who was justified in what action they took. But I think we have to send a message that this kind of behavior, as my colleague to my right said, is unacceptable on the House. And I would say whatever was maybe the least of the ones that we have to choose from in taking action, I would say I would recommend that, to send a message to others that the behavior is not acceptable.
Representative Osman, do you have any comments, or I'll go if you want to go next, or do you want me to go?
Well,
Yeah, okay.
Oh,
Well,
did-
Representative Amix, did you have some? No, okay.
I thought you were.
as we're having discussion as to what the proper procedure might be, I think it might be helpful if I could call upon the revisor to discuss the three options available should we decide to take action today, and what those mean. Is that something that?
That would be fine, yes. Mr. Self, if you could remind us again what the parameters of our remit is in this respect.
Certainly. Gordon Self, Revisor of Statutes. The Rule 4902, subsection C says, upon completing its hearing and deliberations thereon, the Select Committee may dismiss the complaint or may make recommendations to the full House for reprimand, censure, or expulsion. As I indicated earlier, the Constitution talks about only censure and expulsion. Reprimand is in the rules, and I'm going to be very honest with you. I think it is up to this body to decide the difference or what they believe is entailed in reprimand. Traditionally, reprimand has provided the option to be less public in nature. In other words, a letter possibly to the person involved, whereas censure is I think traditionally seen as a public, I'm going to use the word again, but a public reprimand or a public, some kind of public statement that they believe the conduct was considered misconduct. And of course, expulsion, you know what that means. So the difference between reprimand and censure is to a great extent up to this committee and the body as a whole.
Thank you. Are there any further questions of the revisor in that respect? Representative Humphreys.
So just a couple things. I mean, I feel like, Mr. Self, if that the committee may make recommendations to the full House of Representatives for reprimand, censure, or expulsion. So it almost seems like the reprimand also is a recommendation to the full House. But I want to call everyone's attention to the fact that in the last investigative committee, it was not public, and we didn't make a recommendation to the full House. And so we did write a letter. The committee together wrote a letter with the help of our head revisor to the person, and we sent that strongly worded letter to him, and it was private, even though maybe we also made it public. I've kind of forgotten about what happened there. Maybe he made it public. I don't remember exactly what happened, but we didn't make a recommendation to the full House of what we thought needed to happen. Instead, it was more private. Sorry. And anyway, so that's, a couple things there that I don't know if you needed to respond to that or if that was just my comments.
You may respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is correct. Everything you said is correct. And I think to some extent, it goes back to my opening comments that the Constitution makes it clear that the House can deal with these matters, and period. So that the rules are an expression of the House dealing with these matters, and I certainly didn't question, even though it wasn't specifically laid out in the rules, I did not question that particular select committee chose to do their own letter, so to speak, of reprimand. That was something that I believe was within their discretion, even though that it wasn't specifically set out in the rules.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And was the letter specifically called a letter of reprimand, or is that just kind of a common use of the term? Do you remember?
I would say it was more common description. I'd have to go look at the letter again to see if it actually made that use of words.
Yeah, I'm just saying sometimes we use common words and that may be in conflict with the rules.
Representative Humphreys.
I feel like I need to say one more thing that's not exactly on this topic. It's about the facts, but I think I just publicly want to say that, there is a dispute in the facts of if Representative Hoheisel had stopped and put his finger in the face of Representative Carr, or if he kept walking. And we had testimony that said both things. And so I think it is a dispute of the facts about the threatening behavior. And so that's why I should have said this when we were talking about the facts, so I'm sorry, but I think it was publicly important to say I'm not accepting the fact that there was a stance that was threatening, and we also know from Representative Carr's testimony that he feels like he could take on Representative Hoheisel if he needed to. He said that several times. And so I'm just not agreeing to that fact. I just wanted that to be clear. I'm sorry for that I had to go back and say that.
Thank you. Yes, Representative Ballard. Mm-hmm.
I would do a clarification in that when I asked Mr. Hoheisel, what would you do differently? He said, I would have kept walking. Okay. That was publicly what he said. If I had it to do it differently, I would have kept walking. So that is implying he stopped. Okay.
Thank you. Representative Osman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As to what we ultimately decide, I'm still listening to the deliberation, but I think there's two comments to be made. One is the question of, does this incident rise to the level of complaint? I think that answers itself in that a complaint was filed, and it is not up to us to make that determination as to whether this particular incident was enough to warrant a complaint, because to the complainant, it was. And so here we are. The other question is of, history and whether Representative Hoheisel, Representative Francis made the comment that Representative Hoheisel has never had a complaint filed against him in the past. And that may be true. An alternate method of describing the situation is that the entirety of this body, 125 members, have never had a complaint filed against them, with the exception of Representative Hoheisel. No. Oh, if that is inaccurate, that may be so, but so I'll continue to listen to the deliberation.
Thank you. Representative Humphreys.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have interrupted. We can talk offline about that.
Thank you.
Representative Ballard.
One other thing that was important to me, I asked both of them, were they friendly with each other? Was there any animosity? And both representatives said no. It was a friendly relationship. They had never really had encounters. So it's not like they were edgy with each other. But they both agreed they had a pretty good relationship, though they didn't have much contact with each other.
And if I might ask then, how do you see that fact playing into our deliberation?
The reason why that one is important to me is that if I had a disagreement with someone, it was like almost maybe anytime we came together, we would be very edgy with each other and would be likely to have an encounter. Right. But Representative Carr said in the beginning, we don't spend time, but it has been amicable, they were fine. I asked that same question to him because I wanted to know what might have precipitated something else because of a prior thing, and they indicated they did not have that. This was a one-time incident.
Thank you. I think we're ready for a motion if there's one on the table. Representative Francis.
Well, and I don't think I've made I've made how I feel about this pretty aware. I believe that Representative Hoheisel has no history of misconduct that would cause us to take this to a higher level. I don't believe that it really falls underneath Chapter 12 of Masons, which deals with debate and decorum. And while it may have risen to disrupt the body, both parties had a hand in that escalation. And so I would make a motion to dismiss the complaint against Representative Hoheisel and impose no sanctions.
Representative Humphries seconds the motion. We have a motion on the table. We've discussed this, but if anyone wants to discuss further, that's available at this point. Representative Ballard.
I don't feel comfortable is not the word. I think there should be a reprimand of some type. Again, because of, yes, both were involved in it, but who actually started it? Are we going back to what happened at the well prior to that? And are we dealing with the incident that took down the aisle to stopping at the desk to saying, this is bullshit? So it depends on where we're starting from. If one was precipitated by that and then it occurred. To me, we should have very similar something to another case where there's a letter just saying this kind of behavior is unacceptable. To dismiss it is to say it didn't matter. And I feel it did matter because a lot of people got involved in it and they witnessed it. But not to the level of expulsion or dismissing anyone or anything, but just the acknowledgement that it did happen. And as a legislator, myself included, we just can't escalate things to that point. So I would be opposed to just totally dismissing it.
Representative Amix, and then Representative Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real quick and going along with the comments of my colleague, and from what I had said before, I think it would be totally inappropriate on our side to make a motion or to vote for a dismissal because I think that there was an action here that was taken that caused a disruption to the floor and the proceedings of the day. And I think that we have the responsibility of some action other than dismissal to be taken here. And, I call it censure, and I appreciate our revisers' comments about, what we have in the rules and what we have in the Constitution. And maybe censure's too much, but, there's got to be something there that says that this event happened, and we will not tolerate it. That we as a body will not tolerate it. And I cannot vote for a dismissal. So anyway, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I understand the concerns, but the way I look at it, we're dealing with a complaint against Representative Hoheisel. We're not dealing with a complaint against the representative that filed it. I do believe that there is shared guilt in this rising to that level. I also look back at what the history of the body has been. We all know these things have happened. We've seen them before. Again, it was dealt with on the floor. I think by going to the next level, we just, if you look at the data we got, there was one in 1951, and there's been like 3 or 4 since, what, 2010? You know, we're continuing to escalate these matters because I think they've always happened. And with that, I still support my motion.
Let me speak to it. I support the motion for several reasons. First, I find it significant that the comments by Representative Hoheisel were not made at the well, but in the conversation on the floor. Section 122.2 is not clear on whether a breach of the order of the House includes acts taken not at the well. Representatives often have conversations on the floor of the House, and sometimes these conversations can become heated. Nonetheless, for the sake of argument, I will presume that Section 122.2 can, in some circumstances, apply to actions or words made on the floor, not in the well. As I've said before, I believe that Representative Hoheisel was one cause for the disruption or disturbance. However, he was not the only cause. Representative Carr also contributed to the disruption in 2 ways. First, Representative Carr's allegation of racism in violation of the rules, and Representative Carr's challenge of Representative Hoheisel to a fight outside. In short, there were 3 contributing causes for the disturbance on the floor, one by Representative Hoheisel's making the comments he did, and the second one, Representative Carr's, and the third. I find in mitigation of Representative Hoheisel's that in mitigation, I should say, Representative Hoheisel appropriately refused the invitation to fight, which tended to de-escalate the situation, and that I find it significant and helpful that he has since apologized to the House for the disruption that he helped to cause. I have heard no such apology from Representative Carr for his contribution to the disruption. I also note that Representative Hoheisel has never, in his 7 years as a member of the House, had any other complaint brought against him or been sanctioned or reprimanded in any way. Finally, I note, as Representative Humphreys has explained, that the precedents, to the extent we can determine the facts in those cases, and I agree it's a little spotty, but there's some indication set forth that some of those facts were such as bribery and lying to the committee, or I'm sorry, to the House about an amendment, were, I believe, more serious than here, and there, in those cases, no sanction was imposed. So, and then finally, I wanted to address Representative Ballard's, I think, valid concern that we send a message that this activity, that Representative Hoheisel acted inappropriately, and I believe that we have done that in this committee. Virtually every one of these members, myself, every member of the committee has at one time or another made that statement that we believe that the actions by Representative Hoheisel were inappropriate. And so I think we've done that in public, and we've made our views of that clear, and I don't think that any further action in that regard is warranted. I therefore support the motion to dismiss. We'll now go to a vote on the motion. Because our committee is so small and I think it important, unless there's an objection, I'm going to ask for, rather than a voice, because then I don't think I could even determine it listening. So I'm going to ask that people raise their hands to determine their vote. Those in favor of the motion to dismiss and to not sanction Representative Hoheisel raise their hands. And those opposed, same sign. So the vote is 3 in favor and 3 against. I'm now going to ask the reviser, question as to where, if ever, what do we do next?
Well, once again, to a great extent, it's up to you as chair and this committee, but that motion did not prevail, so there's not, the complaint's not been dismissed. So at this point, I don't know if there's any other motions that might be made. If no other motions are made, it would really be up to you as chair, you know, where to proceed from here. But one option would be to adjourn and not meet again.
Okay. Are there any other motions? Seeing none, we will adjourn the meeting.